viewers, my name is Alex. Today I'm going to do a bit of an ad hoc video on the subject of lighting, on the lights you use when you paint your miniatures. You know, I'm someone who's been working with lighting professionally for about 15 years. This is also a bit of a sequel to a video that Ninjan did. He doesn't know I'm making his sequel. Ninjan's video presented different types of lamps that one can use for miniature painting in different sort of price categories. But there's more things that I feel are important to mention when it comes to lighting and miniature painting than just comparing different lamps and technical specs. There's also some technical specs that should be talked about maybe more in depth. So that's why I'm doing this video. The final reason for making this video is that a company that most of us have heard of called Redgrass Games is releasing a sort of hobby miniature specific lamp. Because this specific lamp and the advertising around this lamp talks about things that hasn't really been talked about before in miniature painting lamps. There's technical terms, there's all these kind of things. And so I figure maybe we should try and dissect what all these terms actually are and if they're important to you or not when painting your miniatures. The most important thing with light and lighting when painting miniatures is that The most important thing with light and lighting when painting miniatures is that you're comfortable. There's lots of different technical aspects. Your painting might get affected by what lamp you use. But in the end, it's just a hobby, painting little plastic toy soldiers under a lamp. And I mean, the range is huge. We've got, like, in one end, we've got competition level painters, where things like color rendering and perfect work environments is really important. And at the other end of the scale, we've got people sitting at their kitchen table painting miniatures with their kids under just your regular kitchen lamp. And so you just need to find what's important to you and what works best for you. I bet you that there's plenty of really skilled miniature painters out there that use the same kind of setup that they started with because they're comfortable in that environment, and that's more important than getting just a little bit better quality of lamp or light. And I bet you there's plenty of miniature painters out there that just kind of slap paint on their miniatures under something really expensive when it comes to light. The most important thing is that you're happy. That being said, there are technical things that will affect, how you paint. And I hope that in this video, there are a few of them at least that are kind of for free, And then there's some that you're going to have to pay for. But in the end, it's a hobby. So we should just find a level that we enjoy doing it at and adjust thereafter. So this is a sort of $20 IKEA office desk lamp with a light in it. With just the one light, there's a first sort of problem, which is you need to see your miniature. The second problem is that you want to see the camera. No. The second problem is that having a naked light bulb like this, you get a pretty harsh light. It's sort of like on a metallic silver painted Necron like this. It's kind of difficult to see what is actually the paint and what's not just a really bright highlight and reflection. So then what people do is, you just diffuse that with something nice and fluffy like this. You can use baking tray paper. You can use whatever sort of half see-through kind of cloth. There's even, if you want to be really picky, there's you can order online professional grade diffusion plastic. With this diffusion, your light bulb sort of becomes larger. And because your light is larger, it becomes softer. And so you get a bit of a softer light on your miniature. But because you need to keep it on the side like this to actually be able to see the miniature, what most people do is that they buy 2 lamps. So here is IKEA desk lamp number 2. You can then space these out, diffuse them with whatever you diffuse them with, and you've got like an even light distribution over your miniature. So what's wrong with this setup? Well, what's wrong with this setup is, apart from the actual LED light bulbs that are in here, and we're going to talk about that a bit further ahead in the video, is not with the lamps. It's with the rest of the room. And what's here? Something we rarely consider when painting miniatures and talking about lights is the fact that we only talk about the lights. We don't talk about our surroundings and what our eyes are actually seeing when they're looking at the miniature. What I see now when I look at this miniature is a yellow desk, 2 lights shining right in my eyes. There's like a dark room surrounding. It's not just the miniature, and it's not just what these 2 lamps are doing on the miniature. And a huge strain can be put on our eyes if we don't actually consider our surroundings. So for instance, sitting like I am right now in a dark room is a really bad idea. What I do when I paint miniatures is I, work in a bright room so that your eyes don't have to sort of constantly do a workout every time they look at something that isn't your miniature. If your miniature is really, really brightly lit and the rest of your room is dark, or the other way around, but then you won't be able to see your miniature, then you're putting quite a lot of strain on your eyes. The same goes for lights shining into your eyes, like these. If I was painting miniatures right now and not filming, how do I even turn this thing off? Then these lights should be off. Because having bright lights shining into your eyes while you're trying to focus on something else will also put a big strain on your eyes. Pretty fast you can notice that you start to believe you probably need glasses, because it's really difficult to sort of focus on details and things get a bit blurry. It's almost like going snowblind. Because you're just staring into this white light. This is why I don't really understand why a lot of people have their computer screen on. Like usually a lot of painting setups is you've got your desk and all your paints and then you've got your big screen on here with like a film going or Discord or whatever. You've actually got a really, really bright light shining into your eyes, which will strain you. It's also a reason for maybe not working with the sort of rainbow shaped, there's like these lights that go in a vault kind of a thing like this. It's like a LED strip that works, it's supposed to give you an even light all over your miniature. The thing is that usually the lights that are on the side will also be shining into your eyes and putting a big strain on your eyes. The same goes for what else is surrounding you. It's pretty hardcore to like paint your entire room in a sort of medium gray and have a medium gray floor and a medium gray ceiling and like everything's evenly lit just to do your hobby. But I'm just trying to alleviate some of what might actually become a strain on the eyes, not sort of what is right and wrong out of a painting perspective, but just, if you want to sit and paint for a few hours and your eyes get tired, what I'm talking about might be one of the reasons. And the next one is actually what you've got underneath. I usually have a black cutting mat. This is for visual purposes because I make YouTube videos. I just think that the video stands out a lot better. It's actually not great having a black cutting mat. And then I have a white wet palette. So my eyes are constantly shifting between something dark and something quite bright because the white of the wet palette reflects the painting lamp. So that's just really bright. And then there's something really dark. And then my eyes are trying to focus on the miniature. A more sort of holistic way of working with your surrounding is having a sort of medium gray background. And like having, if you have a wet palette that has really white paper, is like having that a bit to the side so it's not sort of straight underneath your miniature, because that'll strain your eyes as well. I tried to use this for a while. This is what I would call medium gray. Unfortunately, I don't use it anymore because I just think it's overly branded. But this sort of medium gray color underneath, while you paint, is a very pleasant experience for your eyes. Now let's talk about color temperature. Color temperature is measured in Kelvin. And usually when we talk about sort of lamps and painting and stuff like that, the term daylight temperature comes up a lot. You should be painting at a daylight temperature. And daylight temperature, depending on what time of day it is, what the sun is doing, is somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 Kelvin. Essentially, you can have warm and cold temperatures of light. So, for instance, if I can just twist a knob here, this is a warmer light, and this is a cooler light. That's what we mean when we talk about color temperature. If it's warm or if it's cold. The cold is a higher number of Kelvin. So this, for example, says that it's 6,500 Kelvin. This is 2,700 Kelvin. So the lower the number, the warmer the light, the higher the number, the cooler the light. Daylight is considered to be cool, whereas, you know, your regular sort of old school light bulb or these sort of warmer LED lights tend to be warmer. So what is a good color temperature to use when painting miniatures? It's a bit of a tricky question and it's got more than one answer. The simple answer would be that I'd say that you should be somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 Kelvin, which is inside a sort of daylight temperatured realm. And you can learn to sort of trust your eyes. Usually if you look at something, you'll say, oh, that's a yellow light. You know, if you just see a light and you say that's just a bright light, it's just white, then that's usually a good spot to be in when painting miniatures. I guess we can consider the fact that the human race has been around for a lot longer than electrical lights. And we've been outdoors a lot more than we have been indoors with electrical lights. And so that sort of daylight realm is something that is part of the evolution of our eyes and how we perceive colors and all of that. This is sort of mumbo jumbo, not really science, but personal opinion. But the fact is that when I look at this miniature and sort of change the temperature a little bit, it looks yellow, it looks blue, somewhere in between, it just sort of looks like silver, and I kind of like working there. And we're about 4,500 Kelvin. So my personal opinion when it comes to color temperature is finding something that you're a bit more comfortable with, but staying in the cooler realm. The big thing is mixing color temperatures, which we don't talk much about either. Because like right now, I've got this one, got these, and I've got this big lamp that, you know, is shining the light on me. So if you've got a room where you've got, you know, whatever weird orange light going, and then you have like a computer screen here, which is really bright and like blue, and then you've got your painting lamps. Then you've got about 3 or 4 different types of color temperatures, all just making a big ass jumble beep of what should be your daylight realmed color temperature. I'd say it's more important to try and have like a similar color temperature throughout your room than worrying too much about what that color temperature actually is. So this is the Redgrass Games lamp. The thing is, with this lamp, what the company has done is they've been starting to talk about something that is called CRI, and a little bit opened a bit of a Pandora's box, because this is not something we've been really talking about in miniature painting lamps before. And I think this is something that can get sort of technical and difficult for people to understand, and that is sort of the major reason why I want to make this video, is explain the whole CRI thing, which in theory is something I've been using as a professional within film and photography for some time. but it's not really something one considers as, just a person who buys a lamp from IKEA to use when painting your little Necron. So CRI stands for Color Rendering Index. Sorry, I should probably do this first, right? CRI stands for Color Rendering Index, and there's a lot of lamps about. And essentially, light is, a lot of different frequencies of different colored lights. So it's a spectrum of different colors that makes white light. Like you've seen the Pink Floyd album from Dark Side of the Moon. There's a, that kind of thing. So CRI is measured in sort of a number from 1 to 100. Usually if you buy a lamp on Amazon, and it'll say CRI 72 or CRI 86. Basically 100 is as good as you can get. And as good as you can get is having as full a spectrum of all the different frequencies of light. And the issue here, which is an issue that has sort of only arisen with LED lights, we'll get to that, but the issue here is not that you've got an equal spectrum that is just less or more. The issue is that LED lights can just totally lack the one frequency of light, so that a lamp, like one of these, might not have a full frequency of red. So you've got all the other colors like the yellows and the blues and all these things, but no red. That means you won't see red as well on your miniature, sort of. Now this can be a pretty big issue when working with film, like I do. You know how you go into a room and you can just feel from certain sort of LED lights, same as the ones I have in the ceiling and stuff like that, that it's just something's a bit off. Everything feels a little bit green or a little bit sort of pink, and it just feels weird. And that's usually because there's like one color is totally missing out of the color spectrum. When it comes to LED lights, that's usually red. Now, because this is a bit of an issue when working with film, there's obviously tools to help people who work with film to measure the quality of light. And I happen to have one. So for instance, just to show you what we're talking about, let's turn off all the lights and test a regular sort of IKEA LED light bulb versus the Redgrass Games fancy LED strips. And so we press measure somewhere, there we are, and we get lots of fancy information. What we can see first here is the color temperature, which funnily enough they say is 4,000, and this one says 5,000. There's also a color spectrum that shows us how full this spectrum is. We can also press this button and choose CRI. We can see that we've got a CRI rating of 97.6, and here you can see all the different sort of the spectrum of light. You can see all the colors here, right? So we're doing pretty good, and it's pretty even. If we compare that to, wow, that's dark. This little thing here, there's a pretty big difference, right? Can you see me? Okay. Overall, we've got a lot less, but if we look at the red and the blue and some others, they're just drastically less. We've also got a color temperature of, let's see the spectrum here, if this thing actually works. We've got a color temperature of 2,658 Kelvin, which I would consider to be too warm. And if we look at the spectrum here, is just a fascinating difference in things that are missing. Like see this curve, the dip from the blue. Obviously, if we would put like a daylight filter on here, if it would be a daylight temperatured bulb, then it would be more in the blue realm. But there's still a big sort of dip in the red and in the blue. And so that affects what we see, because our eyes can only see what they see with the light provided. And if the light provided doesn't have a full spectrum, then the colors we see will be affected, and we won't see those colors as strongly. And the other ones would also be skewed. It's not only that the reds, or like the skin tones, will appear differently, the other colors will actually not be fully rendered correctly. So let's just take a few more samples with this. Let me explain the CRI thing a little bit more. This is the light that I've been painting under for some time. It's more like a LED panel made by a company called Aperture, it's actually a sort of more of a film style lamp, and we can check the CRI of that and see that it's not as good as the Redgrass Games lamp. It's missing a bit in the dark blue spectrum. It's actually a bit more expensive than the Redgrass Games one, but it's slightly larger and has more sort of functions like being able to change the color temperature and things like that. And it's made for film. This is a cheap LED light that is still sort of adjustable when it comes to color temperature, and that through some kind of a Bluetooth app from a very cheap hardware store. This is a light bulb from Aperture, which is made for film photography. So here's another cheap IKEA LED light bulb. So this is an interesting one. This is actual daylight. There's no light bulbs, nothing going. It's just two windows. The weather outside is a bit sort of sun coming through the clouds. We've got a pretty full-on CRI going. We've also got about 5,082 Kelvin and a really nice sort of spectrum. There's, as you can see, not as much blue, but that's because, it's not as cool. But there's no big gaps missing in the spectrum. And so, in fact, daylight has a full CRI and is daylight temperatured, and so is a pretty good source for you to paint your miniatures by if it's bright enough. And what is daylight? Well, daylight it's our sun, which is a big ball of fire. And what else have we got that produces light? Through the process of burning. Well, this is a tungsten light, a 650 watt light bulb, you might call it, and that's for a professional sort of lamp for filming. Using tungsten is actually still kind of considered the industry standard in Hollywood, even though we've got all these fancy other LED light things going. This is a regular old school light bulb. There's a wire that burns and produces light with pretty much the same CRI rating as daylight, because it's kind of the same thing, burning ball of flame in the sky or a small burning wire in your lamp. So let's just measure that. The CRI of a light bulb is doing pretty good. We got a CRI rating of 95.2. Sorry, you can't really see me. Got a CR rating of 95.2 from the sort of $20 lamp with like a $2 light bulb in it. And if we compare that to the Redgrass Games is better. It's 97.7, but at a price that I've been told is about $200. There's obviously more to this lamp than the CRI. There is reasons why light bulbs are sort of annoying. This one is warm, it's yellow. This can be remedied by like putting a cool daylight filter on top. This will probably affect your CRI rating a little bit more. depending on, what kind of plastic you put in front of there. They get warm, so they, depending on how close you've got your miniature, paint can dry faster because of the heat. They'll use more energy, even though I don't think that, if you've got a house, if you've got a regular old school light bulb in your painting lamp, won't really affect your energy bill that much. They're also maybe difficult to get a hold of where you live. But the fact is that the problem with CRI is something that we have created by starting to use LED lamps. It was never a problem before LED lamps. I'm going to try and end this talk about CRI with a bit of a conclusion, because frankly this video isn't already long enough. Essentially, a bad CRI is the curse of cheap LED lights because of how they are produced. If you buy a relatively expensive lamp, expensive LED lamp made for, painting, crafting, miniature painting, these kind of things, it's probably going to be good. If you buy a really, really cheap LED lamp, the chances are really high for a bad CRI. The issue here is that even if the company who sells the lamp says the CRI, they only show you the percentage, the 70%, the 75%, the 80%, the 85%. They don't actually show you the spectrum. So you don't see if it's, certain frequencies that are just totally missing, which is usually the case with cheap LEDs. So try, if you can, to find someone who shows the actual spectrum of the lamp when you buy a lamp. Something I didn't mention is fluorescent tubes. Usually you get something in the ceilings of offices, or maybe even the convention center where you went to see the painting competition. They're usually, the absolute worst. I didn't have any around here to measure. I did after the fact, and this is the spectrum of a fluorescent tube. And so, just, whatever you do, try and stay away from fluorescent tubes when you paint, if you actually want to see what colors you're using. Okay. The last sort of technical thing I would like to talk about, it's not really technical, it's actually maybe more emotional, but a lot of the time when talking about lamps, what lamps to buy, like the excellent guide that Ninjon did between different levels of lamps, is lumen, which is the strength of the light. This used to be simpler as well. With the old school bulbs like this one, this is 25 watts, and then you could buy 50 watts and 60 watts. And then all of a sudden with LEDs, it's all over the place, and you don't really know how bright something is. The question is, do you actually want bright? And this is emotional and personal. But if we have a look at something like this, which is, okay, so we've got a really bright light going. I've had issues with my miniatures, they get a bit dark when I have too bright a light. I think my eyes start to compensate for the bright light, and I paint the miniatures too dark. There's obviously a limit to this. I can't paint, I strain my eyes if I haven't got a well-lit miniature. But if it's too bright, it actually affects how bright I paint. Obviously a personal thing, but it's also something that we don't talk about. We just talk about, is this bright enough? There's so many lamps here now. Is this bright enough? Whereas the question maybe should be like, how bright do we really need it? To end, I'd also like to say, it could be a good point looking at your miniature in different lights. This is the thing as well. We always just talk about finding the one perfect lamp, whereas a really good way to sort of not trick your eyes, but to maybe get a bit more of an honest opinion of what you're seeing is changing the light source. Because our eyes adapt to what we see. You might be looking at something going, and your eyes have neutralized it. It doesn't look yellow, it just looks sort of normal. And then if you go into to another room with another light and look at it, and you go, okay, so now it looks yellow. And then you go back, whoa, it's dark again. And you're like, yeah, it really is a bit yellow. I should maybe change that. You know, just walking around with it, going up to the window, going up to, you know, a different light. It'll sort of reset your eyes so that when you sit down again by your painting desk, you might see completely new things. Okay, there we are. The question of what's a good lamp and what's important is totally up to you, and is mainly about what you're comfortable with. There is certain technical things, like the fact that this Redgrass Games lamp will render color better than a regular LED light. It's, you know, it's not very many LEDs that have this good color rendering index. And so if that's important to you, if you're really sort of bogged into, I want, you know, to see the proper colors, and you think that maybe the people that are going to see your miniature will also be viewing it in proper sort of rendered colors, then consider things like this. If you're more like, you know, I sit with my kid at the kitchen table, there's a lamp, that means we can see, and so we can paint. That's your perfect painting lamp. This is all totally up to you, but I hope that some of the points in this video that I know has been ad hoc and unscripted and a lot of rambling, but maybe you touched on some things that you might not have heard about before or not thought about before. And I'd like to thank you for watching, and goodbye. Oh, and please don't forget to like and subscribe, join the Patreon, and you can super comment, all these things, because this thing ain't cheap. Bye.